Councilman Ford. Councilwoman Swearingen-Washington.
Present.
Councilman Warren.
Present.
Councilwoman Walker.
Present.
Chair Carlisle.
Present. Chair observes quorum. Colleagues, we have three items on the agenda today. We have an update of the third quarter capital improvement budget and operating budget, a presentation from Finance Division on fiscal year 25, and a presentation from Engineering on fiscal year 25. With that being said, Chief Person, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Budget Chair. My name is Walter Person. I'm the interim CFO for the City of Memphis, 125 North Main. And I want to take the time to introduce you to the manager of CIP for the City of Memphis, Tristan Gately Sweat. He will be producing and actually presenting the quarter 3 CIP report. And this is in accordance with our past practice as well as many of our bond covenant agreements. So that's why it's so important. We thank you for your indulgence. Tristan.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, Council. Tristan Gately Sweat, CIP Manager. So this is the standard report that we deliver each quarter, but I do want to kind of take a step back as we go through some of the slides and just kind of point some things out, seeing that there are new council members. All right, go ahead, Chief. Kind of gives you a table of contents. The first page is a capital improvement plan overview, just kind of explains what the CIP budget is, the ordinance number that adopted the FY24 CIP budget. This breaks down the funding sources that make up the FY24 CIP budget. Just almost $96 million GO bonds, $500,000 operating transfer in, $40 million Public Works Stormwater Fund, $108 million in Sewer Fund, and then the carry forward allocations. I'll talk about those briefly as well. This breaks down what's happened with the $96.4 million. I did go ahead and include the $500,000 operating transfer in this page, so to avoid doing another graph. So adopted budget, 96.4 in the blue column. In the black column, 89.6. That's the budget that has been appropriated. And then you have 34% spend as of March 31st. That's money out the door. And then the yellow bar is amount encumbered. What's on a contract actively encumbered and committed. Do the same thing for the enterprise funds, sewer and stormwater. Same exact columns, $149 million. Adopted budget, $69 million has been appropriated, no spend, and we've got a $27 million encumbrance. And then the third graph just rolls up all of the funds. Yes, sir. Third quarter CIP review. It looks like this on the front. We're on page 7 now. So this is all funds rolled together. So this is your GO bond as well as your enterprise funds. Your adopted budget for FY24 was $245 million and just breaks out the same exact columns.
Everybody okay with where we are?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you want?
Sir. So those first three graphs, they just roll everything up to kind of give you a high-level overview of where we are on our execution of our FY24 CIP budget as of March 31st. Then the next 20 so slides just break it down by division. I just want to really quickly break down the different columns. You've got your project number, your project name, and then your funding source. Obviously, most of the divisions are funded by GO bonds with the exception of our enterprise funds, but there are a few other funding sources that we've added in there as well. The FY24 adopted budget is the first numbers column. That obviously never changes. Your adopted budget's set in stone. Then your allocation, the money that's been placed into that project. This is really helpful because it allows you to track the flow of money. I want to be able to, track where dollars have gone because we approve cover lines every year, essentially just a holding bank for the project. So you approve a $1.7 million traffic calming devices cover line. Well, what you want to know is where is that money gone and what's the execution on it. So that's what the project below that one does, where it indents over speed hump install group 13. That shows you that the 1.7 has gone from the cover line to that project, and then it shows you the execution on that project. So for that one, we've got a $1.2 million spend, which is 72% of our budget. 150,000 is encumbered, and then finally the blue columns to show you cumulative projects. So obviously a lot of these projects are funded over multiple fiscal years, so it just shows you just the magnitude of that particular project. The very last column in yellow is the FY23 carry forward. The FY23 carry forward for CIP is just any dollars that were approved in a prior year budget and then weren't appropriated by the end of that fiscal year and were agreed to be carried forward into the next fiscal year. So obviously they can be repurposed, they can be removed from the project, or they can be carried forward in this case. Yes, sir. And then obviously, moving pretty quickly, we go into each division. You have the convention center, $250,000 cover line.
There's way too many projects. Sorry. All right. I will give a general thing. There's always a cadence to these projects. So like paving's a good one to use for the cadence. Like we get into the winter time, obviously it drops off. We don't do a bunch of pothole repairs and paving right before that because of the temperature changes, et cetera. So when you see the paving line item, you don't really see it pop until now. Same as kind of when you look at our revenues, they pop when we collect sales tax and they pop when we collect property taxes. Are we August? We're August. We're February. Can't remember. August. Two governments. But here's the general thing that I'm not happy about is that several of these aren't even close to being encumbered, and we are at the end of the fiscal year. I recognize that we have a transitioning administration, but I don't want to sit here and belabor the point. But so here's what I'm going to do. We are going to give divisions homework. We did this last year, and so you can tell directors they can couple projects, meaning Robert's got several stormwater bond projects, but I want in writing a status update from these project managers where they are and why they're there and what they're going to do to improve it. So there are too many smaller projects that can be executed. So and I'll make another general note, colleagues. Yes, there are times where you will see money accruing through the years. Again, Robert's budget, Director Connect's budget's a good example, where he has to accrue the cash in order to manifest a project. We just have to spread it out over several years. We have several projects like that in here. Most of them are like the police academy, right? So those renovations, they go in phases, et cetera. But there are a bunch of small projects in here that should at least have contracts out of them or gone out to bid or at this point have been encumbered. And I could sit here and go line by line and other members could go line by line, but the reality is I think that since we're not going to get the cash out the door and do the work that way, we'll do a little homework and you guys can get division directors to get us in writing explanations about where they are in these projects. Members, if you have one that is near and dear to your heart, or you want an update, Councilman Walker, if you want to know where they are on, Whitehaven STEM or any other facility, or Rhonda wants, I know Rhonda's very passionate about Hospitality Hub North. I mean, those division directors need to tell us why those projects are lagging. We can't get started off like this. I'll just leave it at that. If there's anybody else that has another question or comment, I certainly don't want to stop you, but and you're certainly entitled to ask about a project now. I just think it'll be more beneficial to get those directors to put it in writing so that you've got something to reference back to as we proceed through the end of this year and into the next fiscal year. I'll call it something to kind of hold them accountable to. Like I said, I want to be reasonable and acknowledge the fact that there was a transitioning administration, but there are several people within the government that are bridges through administrations, full stop. I mean, there are people that have been here from Harrington to Wharton to Lowry, or I guess Harrington to Lowry to Wharton, Strickland to Young. So we can't utilize that as an excuse because we got term limits in perpetuity. I'm gonna leave it at that. And we'll say if we could have it by the next council meeting, I think that's reasonable. That's a full 8 business days. Is that right? 8 business days. It should be reasonable. If there's a specific project, email the director. But if you would CC Meredith so that we can assist in following up on that. And then if directors have questions about certain projects or project categories like the paving group or the stormwater group, I'm happy to try and facilitate. So this is not intended to be full busy work, but it's intended to be a little busy work. But I'm happy to work with you on compiling those together, aggregating them rather into categories. All right, let's move on to the operating budget. All right, let's get to operating.
These are hot. Some microphone?
Yeah.
Hot off the press.
We wanted you to feel the warmth of city government. Oh, and I guess while you guys are getting set up, colleagues, another thing to be aware of when you're going through the CIP. Another thing to be aware of when you're going through the CIP is to be cognizant of the out years. So if there are projects that you'll want to take this presentation and look at the mayor's CIP proposal for this coming year and bridge the two together just to see if it matches or aligns with the priorities that are important to you.
Okay, moving on to the operating budget. We are beginning, flip to slide 2. We're going to talk about where we were last year versus this year, as well as a revenue and expenditure comparison to see how we're tracking against our budgeted requirements. Revenues and expenditures in last year's adopted budget, both $799, $100,000. To that, we have made adjustments for the works which happened early in the fiscal year. We have $5.5 million in disaster and storm damage, which we are awaiting repayment for, so we'll move that to a receivable when we get that repayment. We had a $1 million donation to Alliance Healthcare. Safer Grant came in at about 1.7. There was a vendor rebate in finance to the tune of $108,000. And again, a $20 million cash flow loan, which we will again state as a receivable when we get that money back from MATA. Okay, moving on to a snapshot of revenues. We're tracking at about 78%, $648 million versus $828 million in the annual funding budget. So that's a little bit more or less over. We would expect to be about 75% altogether. Our local taxes are actually a little bit low compared to where we would expect to be this time of year. It's at 86%, but our local taxes are largely collected in the late summer, early fall time frame. So we would expect that to be a little bit more. Our state taxes, they're just kind of flat to where we expect them to be, just a little bit of positive movement there. We're behind on licenses and permits at 66%, as well as fines and forfeitures at 69%. Our charges for services are more or less where we would expect them to be. Our use of money, which just for a point of reference, use of money would be the interest that we collect on our investments, as well as our basically our fund balances. That is strong, primarily because we have a great money management department and they've been investing in short-term treasuries, which are very high, as you know. We looked and expected that to drop off. The Fed had initially announced a rate cut, but they backed off of that due to, I guess, persistent inflation. So we hope that continues to be strong in the next year. Federal grants are doing pretty well. We've been doing pretty well compared to last year, as a matter of fact. Intergovernmental, again, is strong. That's primarily the airport. Other revenues, really strong again. Some of that is, of course, related to monies that we have received from prior year expenses. Is primarily FEMA payments. And then transfer ins, they're running a little bit behind where we'd expect to be due to some timing issues. Next slide. We can keep moving past the graph. All right, taking a look at year over year, kind of paints a sobering picture that speaks to some of the budget discussions we've already had. If you look at revenues in total against last year, we see we are tracking just slightly under where we were tracking last year at the end of quarter three, 648 versus 662 or 663 really. And expenditures, of course, are way up. They're 15% up. So we're looking at 667 versus 582 last year. Local taxes, again, coming back to that, they're a little bit under last year's collection. That is driven in part by the effects of the refunds that we made due to the state assessed property ratio. The state taxes, a little 3% up, pretty decent, but if you looked at last year and year over year, they were a lot stronger last year. We were really exceeding budget by a great bit. This year, we're kind of tracking to the budget, which means they're slowing. License and permits a little bit down, fines and forfeitures. It's a smaller number, but they're up 8%, so not bad, but it's a smaller base to deal with. Charges for services, again, down a little bit. As we spoke to, use of money, which is the interest that we collect, much stronger, 528%. Federal grants, again, is largely safer, is stronger. Intergovernmental, more or less 10% over. Other revenues, again, I spoke to that. Other revenues, I spoke to that a little bit earlier when I talked about the recovery from prior year expenses. And then if you look at transfer in, you see it at negative 39%. We're hoping that that won't be as drastic as we head into the fourth quarter. Some of that is going to be timing issues, and I can go into a little more detail if you all would like to hear that. Okay. Let me pull that up. Okay. So if we look at some of the elements there, and I know you don't have this before you, but I'll walk through some of the major elements related to that element transfers in. MLG&W pilots. We looked at last year to date, we were at $45 million. This year, we're at $37.3. That is related to the state assessed property ratio. We had talked in the overall overview about a $14 million hit. Part of it hit in local taxes with the ad valorem taxes or the property values. The other part hit us with the MLG&W revenues that we received. In lieu of taxes or pilots from sewer, that we hope is a timing issue. Last year, we had $10.5 million in at this time. This year, we have nothing in at this time. When we look at the state sales tax ratio 2019, which is a referendum fund that we always refer to, we had $10.9 million in this year versus $24.5 at the same period last year. So kind of tracking down, there's some smaller ones. Sewer operating, again, a timing issue, 1.7 last year versus nothing so far this year. And the rest of the numbers are largely flat against last year. had some more graphs. I don't know if that's really relevant. We'll move right on into expenditures in the interest of time. Again, looking at the revenue numbers, we talked about that. Expenditures tracking more or less where we would want them to track against the budget. They're 79%. We expected to have a heavy year in expenditures, and we're tracking a little bit over, but more or less in line, more so than revenues. Personnel expenses, 79% of budget. Materials and supplies, 65% of budget. They're a little bit light, which is somewhat favorable. Some of that may be timing, though, with a lot of our heavier expenses hitting on a seasonal basis in the spring. Capital outlay is real light, and I think it's going to continue to be light through the year at 255 versus a budget of 1.5. Grants and subsidies, it's up, but grants and subsidies also houses the MLG&W operating cash loan. So that's why it's looking so strong against the budget. Inventory, more or less in line. Miscellaneous fees, and et cetera, more or less in line. Transfers out. They're pretty much front-loaded, but yeah, they're tracking to 98% of the budget. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's through Q3. Okay. So I talked to you about MLG&W, and then I talked about the timing of the sewer, which that was 10.5 at this period in 23 versus nothing that we received so far this year. That's through Q3. No, I'm expecting it to come in. I was just saying it's more of a timing issue there. Now, if we're like at the end of June, then I have other concerns. But sometimes, the timing does vary from quarter to quarter with those kinds of payments. No. All right. Yeah, it drags on it. Oh, were we 8? Okay, now we're getting into a look at the Q3 year-to-date expenditures by division. This gives you a chance to look at how the divisions are faring against their original budgeted amounts. And what you would look for here again is a percentage around 75%. Of course, some of our divisions are very seasonal, but more or less they should track to that 75% metric. You see city attorney is a little bit over. One of the things that happened with city attorney, not much, but they were forced to do some competitive market pricing to try to get to be competitive with other markets for attorneys. So there were some grants of salary increases early on. City council's doing a phenomenal job, 64% against budget. So yeah, just phenomenal. Clerk's office is doing a good job too of managing within their resources. Judges more or less tracking in line. City engineer is fairly well up. I think city engineer has had a number of pretty significant shocks this year that has driven their salaries up a good bit. Executives tracking more in line. Finance at 63% is a little bit under. Of course, we've been short-staffed in several critical areas for several months. We've been recruiting, but it's been hard to get people in. Fire is tracking a little bit above budget, and that is the adjusted budget for the modifications you all made at 79%. General services more or less tracking in line. Grants and subsidies, again, they're up, and they're up pretty significantly because of the MATA operating cash loan. HCD more or less tracking in line, as is human resources and IT. Library services is running under. I think it's probably due to some staffing constraints as well. Memphis Parks is dead on where they need to be. And police is actually not doing too poorly, although you'll see when we get to overtime that they do have some issues with overtime. And Public Works is running high, and we've been in discussions with Public Works about theirs is mostly on the personnel side, and we'll be talking with them a little bit more as the year goes on.
Yeah, so when are we going to get, and I don't want to do it right now, although we maybe could, but we don't have every director in here. So when are we going to have a discussion about those that have deviated significantly from budget or year over year? When do you want to have that conversation?
Well, I'm not necessarily prepared for it today.
Understood.
But
Tell me how much time.
pretty
you
much
think.
at your leisure, we can do it.
Well, you and I can powwow, but we got to have it. We got to have a public discussion.
Right.
I guess mainly it's. You said you were still discussing with some of the directors, so I want to be reasonable and give you guys time to powwow, corroborate, get your story together. No, but have time to talk and then present to the council and to the public.
Yes, sir.
And you and I can set a threshold on what I mean by major deviation. I'm not really worried about 1%, 2%, 3%, but some of these are significant.
Yes,
So,
sir.
But we'll get together and we'll cycle on a date that works.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's keep going.
All right. Okay, it's kind of dragging a little bit. Alrighty. Okay, so we can look at the year-over-year trend. It kind of answers the question of how we got here. Again, we talked to city attorney. You see how city attorney compares to last year. A good bit over, but again, we did have some modifications and as well as salary changes. The other thing that happened with city attorney too, that really affects this chart is litigation costs. Litigation costs are way up in addition to the salary changes. So we've been making allowances for that as well. City council is up over last year, but they're still well within their budget. Court clerk's office at 18%, not materially surprising. Judges actually down. I don't know if that's because we have several new judges, so it might be a tenure issue. I can't really speak to that as much. Engineering, we talked a little bit about, significantly up. Executive, there were a lot of modifications and realignments in the new year for executive. A different configuration from the past administration drove a lot of that.
Yeah, but you can't say that in a vacuum, because if there's realignment, there's adding, but then there's realignment. And if you're realigning, then you should see that deficit somewhere else. And everybody on here but Director Cash and the judges are up year over year. And obviously you expect some of that naturally, and then increases in budget that were approved. But when you have 20+% swings year over year in divisions that are basically neutral to flat most years, it's
significant.
okay.
It's
As long as we agree on that.
Yeah.
All right.
I wasn't trying to paint too rosy a picture. I agree. But I mean, there were some additional, when I say realignment, the young administration is kind of pursuing a more comprehensive executive group. And we've had some new people to come in. So it has been some new people coming in as well as some new alignments.
Comprehensive. I like that. That's good. McKinsey and Company would call that top heavy. Yes, sir, Dr. Warren.
Is there possibly the reason the city attorney is higher is we pay insurance at the beginning of the year, which is 25% of their budget?
Pardon me again? Pardon me?
Are they higher because we pay their insurance at the beginning of the year?
Insurance is another one of the drivers.
25% of their budget.
That's another big driver.
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hey, will you get on the mic if we're gonna make comments? But I'd really like to.
We're all going to work together for 4 years. We can say, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Councilman. And then after that, I want to get back to and I digress, so I'll take blame for that. But please finish.
So just as we go through this, if you could name like one or two things that the leadership team has found that they're going to implement that might lower costs over the next 2, 3, 4 years, like a restructure or a reorg, and I mean, a comprehensive executive team. Like, is there something you've identified that you're proud of that you could mention to us that we would be proud of too?
In terms of the aggregate budget or executive?
Just in terms of like a cost savings initiative or working smarter.
Well, one of the things that we talked about and been talking about for quite a while is around the overtime issue. And we're going to dive into that in the next couple of pages. But overtime has been a big driver of our costs, especially since we've made some salary modifications in recent time. And one of the things, just discussing, sometimes overtime due to our short staffing in critical areas is done on a voluntary basis. And what happens there is you start to get what I call a bimodal distribution. So you get a large number of folks that get little overtime, and then you get another large number of folks that get too much overtime. So if there's more of an equitable way of distributing that overtime, that would drive some savings.
It's called supervisors, right? I mean, it comes off sarcastic, but the reality is you manage overtime through supervision, right? You know, I was living in LA when they had the first writer's strike back in the early 2000s, and it was flat out, you're not going to work overtime. You must go home or voluntarily stay here, right? And so the reality is while we all appreciate those that work more than 40 hours a week, especially those that are on salary here, it's deeply appreciated. It's how we end up in these cattywampus situations. And further, the most dangerous thing about it is that it opens us up to liability. There are too many litigated cases in too many states for exempt employees working longer than what the intended salary was. And that's something that, again, we all appreciate the American work ethic, but it's something that we have to be incredibly careful in managing.
Yes, sir.
So I'm sorry to dive in, but it's one of those things where one of the questions that I've been asking myself over and over again on how we arrived in the middle of this fiscal year is who authorized people to sign invoices or make orders or encumber dollars that were never approved in this budget without coming to the council first. And now we're at the end of the fiscal year and the city has to pay its bills or else we'll have other issues to deal with, like the litigation going up or, you know, a issue with creditors, meaning our credit could go down because we're not paying our bills. So it just goes back to yeah, I don't want to dive into a tangent because it's something that's frustrated me greatly. The fact that we had directors approving invoices and spending money that they weren't approved to do is irritating is the nicest way that I can say it. I'm sorry, Councilman.
No, and I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate you mentioning overtime, because that's certainly one of the things that we talked about, and we're all going to have the things that we'll be talking about soon. So I was just curious, as we were going through this, I think we all look forward to working through that together. So, and I didn't mean to get us off track either.
No,
So.
I mean, I think it's reasonable. Let's do overtime, and this is my fault, everyone up here.
Well, I started it. Look at us
it's
being
my
nice
fault.
guys. I started it.
My fault. Let's do these last 2 pages of overtime, and then we'll go into the queue. That concludes his presentation.
10. Yeah, so as we get into overtime, you kind of start to see, tangibly what I was talking about. So against a funding budget of $39.3 million, we're looking at nearly $53 million year to date. So we still got a little runway left, got a whole quarter. And, I won't necessarily just get into the details, but it's really evident that you see certain divisions that have a great deal of overtime. And to some extent, like even I'll point out my division, we're at 167%. And a lot of that is due primarily to UKG. And so to your challenge, I could do a better job of mandating that people clock in, clock out exactly on time. But one of the things I've run into in my 4.5 months in this role is that it's just been hard to really just shepherd that because of personnel shortages.
No doubt.
That's a material issue. It is a material issue for us.
So, but again, it's got to be net. It cannot be that you have a personnel shortage when you have a authorized complement that is not full, right? So, like, we all know this. For years and years and years prior to the footnoting of the police budget, the whole point was we had one line item for personnel. And then you'd go to the budget book from the prior year and it'd list where it went, right? Like holiday pay, vacation pay, overtime, right? And the goal and the whole point, and Rollins used to make this all the time, is I'm at 2,000 officers, I'm 1,900 officers. If I can get the other 600 officers, the $28 million a year at that time that he was spending in overtime was net to the personnel, right? Sir. Because the additional personnel was going to feed that.
Offset overtime.
So again, unless we took your authorized complement down to zero, or we did basically zero budget on it, and you had overtime, it cannot be grossed up on top. It just can't. It cannot be. That does not. And again, I appreciate what you're saying about the management on the day-to-day, but as far as the budget, you cannot have a vacancy of 4, 8, 10, 12 people and have people working some amount of overtime and still be over your aggregate budget. I just don't get that.
Well, finance is really not over. If you think back, finance is lower. It's just that this is just a pure overtime line. But I get your point. Yeah, I get your point, definitely.
Look, it's always going to be police and fire driving it.
Yeah. Did you want to say something, Chief?
So let's give this conversation true color. You have a line that this administration will no longer bake in budget, which is attrition. Attrition has been that conversation by which we average the resignation, retirement, and termination over the course of a year. It's a number, not a dollar. So, to Chief Person's point, when you net out the personnel line, you net out including subtracting attrition. So the line is definitely over budget. But to Chair's point, Chief Rollins used to state, I net out. Now, what we did this year, we had $53 million in attrition for current year.
Right. We budgeted $53 million for attrition this year.
$53 million netted out against your top full-time salary line. Once you execute, you'll see many of the divisions will net. One of the other things that we do, or we don't do, is special events. Police and fire, they support a lot of our special events, and they do so in overtime. We don't recoup those dollars.
Why not?
I can't tell you why. I don't know. I would be guessing.
No, but hold on. This is why I'm going to dig on it, because this has come up, and there are events, and I really don't want to dive into it, but it's across the board throughout the year. Because this is a rub for me.
Yeah.
The administration has its authority to administrate the government and contract. That's the mayor's authority. We have the power of appropriation. What you're basically doing is the same thing as signing contracts without an approved budget, meaning someone without any transparency to the public is, with the stroke of a pen, waiving fees in the not I won't say tens, in the millions of dollars throughout the year without any appropriating authority to do so. And the end result is the rebalances towards the end of the year. And, you know, whether it's a worthy cause or not, those are major 7-figure, potentially 8-figure decisions with zero transparency and oversight. So meaning, and I'm not going to impugn Mayor Young, but I'm just going to use him as an example. The office of the mayor can say, I like that group and I like what they do, so we're going to give them free police overtime. No one gave him that authority. That is an appropriating authority from the body. And so we may be seeing a resolution. I don't want the council necessarily to be involved in that. There has got to be a standard policy and procedure about the threshold and determination of how we exercise discretion in waiving city fees. Police and fire are such a good example because they are so expensive. And again, you can make an argument that one event, whether it's Susan G. Komen, the St. Jude Marathon, Memphis in May, Grizzlies basketball, whatever it is, the Tigers basketball, whatever it is, somebody's picking and choosing winners and losers without any oversight to the tune of millions. And so there has to be some sort of middle ground there. Either everybody needs to pay the freight, or the city needs to set up a standard policy. But the picking of winners and losers and waiving of fees of $600,000, $800,000, $1 million a year have got to stop. or they've got to pay the bill. Or the city needs to say, we are contributing $1 million in police overtime towards the St. Jude event because we believe in the mission of St. Jude. So, and honestly, I didn't mean to get into that today, but that has been something that has been on my mind since last November.
Yep.
So,
And
yes,
Chair,
ma'am.
I'm sorry.
It's such a fine line because we often have to have the police protection in order to make sure that those events are successful and don't have unnecessary incidents and you know, it just puts us in a precarious position.
Exactly. I'll use a good one because it's been recently. Southern Heritage Classic could not go on but for the assistance of the Memphis Police Department, and it's a major event for the city. And asking them to pay the bill for that overtime may kill the event in and of itself, right? So, and also the city of Memphis has an obligation under the Constitution, under the rules, to protect the general welfare of the public. Meaning, they can't just say no to that event and not show up, right? They have an obligation to be there and protect people and property. So, but my point is that there's very little transparency into what those events are and how much they cost. And I think it's a conversation worth having, at the very least, so that the public understands, you know, again, if it costs us $3 million to man the St. Jude Marathon throughout the weekend, it is what it is, but at least the public has the right to know. And they may say, you know what, still love St. Jude. But we're being asked to raise taxes, and one of these big line items is overtime, and that's a huge driver. So I think you make a great point. We've got to find a more transparent way to talk about those so that it's not, and again, we're not talking about a couple $100,000 here. We're talking about millions.
So, Chair, to your point, we have discussed in our administration that those costs do need to be passed on, or we need to expressly state what it costs, such that, to Councilwoman Swearingen-Washington's point, in the event there is an emergency, you can have police and fire respond to that emergency, to that particular event. You do need their support. Now, I'll say, as I said before, I don't think it was ever the intent of any of the directors, present or past, to deceive with regard to that. That's just something that we did. Now, the reason I say that, with general services, we executed expense recovery for every Tiger game, every game that we supported at the stadium. So when we ask why, that's why I state I can't tell you why.
How did you do expense recovery?
So we built it back to the division that host, and then of course it was taken from the revenues.
So you'll see
And that's what I wanted to say, because some of these events are annual. So maybe we can be proactive and say, what are you willing to, or have a contract, you know, if you're having this event every year.
Yes, ma'am. I think that's the big thing.
Something.
Is to at least start the conversation.
Yes. Or an ordinance.
Yeah, and then the last thing that we got to take in consideration too is like public works, general services, and then of course fire and police during acts of God. Mm-hmm. So we had the ice, snow and ice. That event this year did not rise to the level of compensable through TEMA. So those are expenses that we have to bear. And so that drives a lot of that in those divisions as well.
Thank you. I've got Councilwoman Walker, Cooper Sutton, and Logan, and then I've got a question for Councilwoman Green after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when you use the phrase picking,
We don't want our police to be security guards.
so when you use the phrase picking and choosing, for me, it made me think about the Hickory Hill Christmas Parade for 2023 that had to be rescheduled. It was the same weekend as the St. Jude Marathon, and the reason was there was no MPD coverage available due to the St. Jude Marathon. So when you said picking and choosing, that's what that made me think about. But public safety, we all deserve to have public safety protection. So what is the process? If there's picking and choosing, I'd like to know more about the process for the picking and choosing, whereby an annual, and this is also an annual event, and it had to cancel because there was no public safety protection available, presence available. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And that is an absolutely great point. I'm curious as well. Councilwoman Cooper Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. What I'm hearing, just as a new council person sitting here, and some of you have been here much longer than I have and in these positions, and I'm just seeing poor practices, bad processes that are in order, and just not really thinking about the way the monies are being handled. Chairman and Councilwoman Walker said picking and choosing about which event is more relevant than the other. But public safety, I think I said a couple council meetings ago that this moving around of this money has to stop. And I think, Mr. Interim Pearson, you're just, you're in a spot, you're in a pickle. You're in a spot that, and I'm glad we're airing all of this out. So we hopefully, even if I'm not here the next 4 years, that we put something in order and in place that we don't have to be here again. Because it's just poor management of money, stealing, not being honest, doing things without the council approval, just doing whatever you want to do. And so when you do that, this is what we get, and this is what we see. So the chicken has come to roost over the many years. I don't think this has just started. What do you think?
No, Councilwoman. This has been overtime, especially, has been an issue for a number of years.
So if I can, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We are not dishonest.
No.
Wait. In the past, they were not dishonest. All of us have attended these events and walked past an officer or fire department personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not free. And we acknowledge it, even if it was silent and we didn't know.
Okay.
We passed and presented budgets. And
yes, they did.
Yeah. And to that point, overtime just didn't become a problem. So what I'm saying is we have to fix it.
Yes.
And we're here today to fix it.
Yeah, I concur. I don't think anybody that's in this room.
It doesn't feel good right now. I know it doesn't feel good. I'm sorry, Chairman. It doesn't feel good because I walked into something that I had no idea that I was walking into, and we're here. But we're here together to get it right. And so we're just airing out our dirty drawers. We're just airing out our dirty drawers so we can get it right. And we're going to do it together these next 4 years and get this city back to where it needs to be and get it in operational so we can be a prosperous city together. So guess what? Everybody's dirty.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair, I yield the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I'll say this, having been here with these individuals for the last few years. One, it's a new day. Mayor Young and his administration deserves the benefit of the doubt, and I appreciate the relationship and the transparency that we've had so far, that it was lacking so much the last time, and the partnership that I feel like we've got. And I really do appreciate that. I will say, Director Adams, I hear you. I mean, I've seen, I've been going to these events as long as you have. It was a surprise to me that we picked up as much as we did. And I think that's more the issue is we have organizations that are doing great work and have huge economic impacts, and we don't want to harm them, but at the same time, it's really easy for everyone. I mean, find me an entity in the city of Memphis outside of maybe Allsac that's not saying that, like, and even Allsac's constantly raise money, but find me an organization that doesn't say that they can't pay that bill if they don't have to, right? So, I mean, I think that's kind of the rub.
But you're right, and we pledge to be much more transparent, much more accountable. Again, that is our pledge since day one.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I think that's a very fair response. Councilwoman Logan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief. I appreciate your transparency. And I'm really, it seems bleak, but I'm very hopeful because we are turning the corner. It seems a corner. I'm laying everything out on the table so that we can right size and we can fix it. So when you all come back, would you also include? I don't know if y'all include escorts. If we charge for that, like police escorts as well. So all of the areas in which, we don't see, but being served, if all of those areas could be brought so we can determine how to handle those. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I've got Councilwoman Warren, and then I'm coming to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think as we're looking at this and moving forward, the one suggestion I might have is that, instead of just us calling St. Jude's and saying, okay, here's your bill, and calling everyone and saying, here's your bill, it might be a good idea for us to look at that and say, look, we haven't been charging this. We have a budget issue. We'd like to split this with you guys this year. Is that going to work out? And just, as you move forward, just see what we can do so we don't hurt people, but we also don't hurt our citizens. I think that would be a reasonable place to start. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I agree, Dr. Warren. So does Councilwoman Swearingen Washington.
I agree. That's awesome, Dr. Warren.
Councilwoman Green. I am curious if you could shed any light on, because usually those large events are partnerships between the MPD and the Sheriff's Department, how the county absorbs that in their budget, or at least y'all's relationship is unique in that
Yeah, so I would start by saying he is his own elected, and so that makes things a little different than what we're seeing here. But I will also say that we do a lot of memorandum of understandings. For example, with the sheriff, several of them are resource officers in the schools, and then they do overtime at the football games or the basketball games. And we have a memorandum of understanding with the school and with the school board that they will help pay for that overtime. And we budgeted in every year what we think that many number of resource officers, that many number of games they go to, what we're expecting. And it is not a contract, but it is a memorandum of understanding that the superintendent signs, that the mayor signs, that the sheriff and their attorney signs. So it is sort of what, and it does not cover the full cost. Yeah, but exactly. So it is sort of the process that Dr. Warren is speaking of. It is not a here's your bill, here's your invoice, but it is a conversation that happens annually, because sometimes we have lowered the number of resource officers, or during COVID times, of course, schools were closed, right? So that was a whole other. We didn't need to have football game coverage, et cetera. But so every year we revisit it and we look at that, and the county pays the sheriff's department's budget, and the sheriff ponies up part of it, and the schools pony up part of it. So it is a little different because we are in charge of the budget of the police in a different way, because the interim chief is not elected the way Sheriff Bonner is elected. And we generally, whatever the sheriff asks for in the budget, we say yes. But we do have the same sort of vacancies and overtime issues on the other side of the street too.
What are our next steps? How do we do that?
I think that, I think Chief Adams has made a commitment to it, and we have to allow him the opportunity to follow through on that and let the administration do their piece. I think they've heard where the council's at, and I trust them to at least get to work on it.
All of our annual events.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is, ones will come up, and I don't want to digress too far because it ain't just events that are cause of this.
It's a lot.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of moving pieces, and I don't want it to be lost on anybody that there was a significant amount of disruption in the transition, because that's just what happens in a transition. This was our first real rollover from turbulence because you had what? Yeah, I mean, you said all that stuff, but all right. I think we'll just call it on the operating budget.
Yes, sir.
I do want, we'll have more conversation about managing materials and supplies and how we can keep the government. It's kind of like the checks and balances on MLGW. We don't want to interfere with the core business of MLGW, but it's our responsibility to hold them accountable and be transparent. We're the ones getting phone calls. It's the same here. When we miss a budget and we are talking about a tax increase, it's including Mayor Young, but it's us getting stopped in grocery stores and community events. And so we have to have some sort of accountability on how people were able to order millions of dollars of materials and supplies and how that's not going to happen in the future. Because I don't want, and I genuinely mean this, I do not want our relationship. It started off pretty well, couple bumps, but pretty well. And I want it to stay that way. And I think that's a big thing for us is to sit here and be looking at a tax increase and have had millions of dollars be spent that were never really approved. And to be frankly honest, Councilwoman Swearingen Washington was one who kind of mentioned it a few seconds ago to my ear. Part of me really wants an explanation from certain division directors, and I may go through the budget again myself and pull those out and ask for them. But, Chief Pearson, we talked about it. There was one division in particular that had approved materials and an adopted approved materials and supplies line item of $700,000, and I think they spent $1.9 million. Like, that shouldn't happen. I mean, if I did that, I'd be out of business really quickly, or at least my creditors would be after me. So I'm not going to belabor the point. We need to move on, but I think we all understand where we are. Council members, I really appreciate the input and the questions. I think it was important. Let's reset. Let's reset, and we're going to go into finance fiscal year operating 2025 when you're ready. You guys ready to go? All right. And then council members, after that, we'll take a quick break after this, and then we'll come back for engineering and talk safety on the streets.
Thank you. All right. Sounds good. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. We'll move right on into the main part of which is primarily the general fund finance operating budget. You also hear from our debt management team. We'll talk a little bit about some of our special revenue funds as well. So it'll be a kind of all finance all day type of discussion. But
It's kind of like what we do here. We're running a business.
But that's kind of where we are. Yes, you can go to the next slide. So here's the org chart. It's kind of a high-level org chart. And I think it's important to realize that finance has a variety of different functions, as you all well know. We have our financial management team, of which Tristan is a part. Administration is primarily the core leadership team, myself, the deputy chiefs that I have, along with the administrative support that I receive. The city treasurer's office, which is responsible for bringing in the majority of the revenues for the city. Debt management, the team that you all heard from in council yesterday and you'll be hearing from again today. The deputy chief that's responsible for that is responsible for management of over $1 billion in debt and refunding and processing. Office of Financial and Strategic Planning, pretty much as the name suggests, involves a lot of financial resource management and structuring our budget office. And I neglected to name my interim budget manager, Anita Taylor, who has now joined me at the desk. She is the head of our budget office. We have procurement that handles all of the processing of goods and services that we purchase at the city, and comprehensive planning and equal business opportunity and development. Those are actually departments that aren't necessarily fully part of finance. The Office of Comprehensive Planning actually reports up to John Zena, but they are housed in our area for financial and budgeting purposes. And the equal business opportunity and development, they more or less report to the executive team, but they are also housed in the finance office.
And that's predominantly because the majority of what they're doing is a financial clearinghouse on the contracts, et cetera.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman. Strategic priorities. Our strategic priorities are designed to align with the strategic priorities of the mayor. So the Finance Division strives to continue advancing a culture of excellence in government by providing fiscal stewardship for the benefit of city operations. Our funding for FY25 will provide the resources that we think are mission critical to meeting the needs of the government. Our non-personnel costs are targeted and focused on reduction and using the minimum amount of resources necessary to meet the needs. We've also focused very heavily on a new grant, a reimbursable state grant called the Violent Crime Intervention Fund grant. We're putting a lot of resources into that because that's going to be a core part of our new comprehensive crime suppression effort. We have staff support to provide funding for all city programs. We manage the grants programs, as I said, and many others. And we also provide support via the engineering team for our urban art and our performing arts areas. All right, quick walk through this page. Our personnel services to adopted budget. We come down to a number of $15,500,000. For the FY25 request, if you look all the way across, you'll see that we're coming in at $15,000,009, roughly almost $16 million, which is an increase of $449, nearly $450,000. Of course, we had council approved amendments of $108,000, which is primarily what we discussed already, and an encumbrance roll forward from last year material supplies of roughly $33,000. Okay. Okay, here we go. Year-over-year changes in expenditures, full-time salaries, increase of $37,704, potential raises for our team based on the raise as well as the bonus suggestion that was forwarded by the administration to $272,531. The pension expense, $19,968. ADC again is coming forward to the tune of $274,000. Kind of rolling on down, we have a little bit of a switch between our choice plan and our select plan. When we saw ours, we didn't recoup as much because I think a lot of people were in choice. So a lot of times that's a wash, but it's not a wash in our case. And we had a reduction in part-time and temp as we try to migrate to support our full-time needs. Attrition at 76,573, moving down to the material and supplies area. We see City Hall printing going up because we have been doing a great deal more printing in recent times for obvious reasons related to the budget. City shop charges and fuel. It's important to note here that we're not really doing a lot of vehicle travel as a division, but we do house the vehicle sales expenses in our division. So that's why that's so high. Printing outside is high. Supply outside has gone up a little bit too because of the expense that we face. Of course, advertising and publications reduced, and miscellaneous professional services and supplies have reduced. So net effect again is right at the $450K. Revenues. We had an adopted budget last year of $4,500,000. A lot of that was generated out of the auctions and sales. Council approved budget revisions, which was the vendor rebate, got us to a funding budget of 4.6. We're returning to the 4.505. We have switched vendors. I think Chief Adams has spoken to this a while ago. We moved to a new vendor for a lot of our vehicle inventory and management. So the request is again for 4.505 because we hope to see some efficiencies from that exercise. Miscellaneous income, yeah, revenue from city auctions. And then we had a rezoning ordinance publication fee of $5,000 from the prior period. Keep going. Division detail. Walking down, you'll see that we are not asking for additional complement. We have 115 in our head count. We have a number of vacant positions, as I mentioned several times before, and several in very key areas for us. And yes, we are posting and actively recruiting for most of those roles. There are a few roles that have not been posted yet, but will be actively in process. So we are doing our level best to try to fill those roles. They are specialized roles. And in fairness, we have faced a little bit of headwinds with recruiting because of perceived compensation challenges. Yes, sir. The 4 that are not posted, let's see, Treasury, I'll have to follow up with the Treasurer to find out why that's not posted. I don't know. More than likely, it's just because out of all areas in finance, they have a slightly higher turnover rate, so it could be that that position has been vacated recently. And I can't speak necessarily to equal business and development because, again, that area is housed with me, but it's more or less led out of executive, so that makes up 2 of the other 3. And in finance and strategic planning, I think we're really trying to target a specific individual in that case, so we're trying to time it. So, yes, sir. Major M&S expenditures, of course, miscellaneous professional services, that was largely driven, and that's kind of skipping to the next slide, by a lot of, no, skip. I was just saying that amount is related to the next slide, which is a lot of, we've used a lot of vendors related to, like, I'd say temporary and contract services, advertising and publications at $168,000. We have a rent expense of $169,000, and I'll touch on that later. Supplies outside, postage, city shop charges. A lot of that is due to inflationary pressures, and pretty much down the line, most of the rest of that has been related to inflation. Travel expense, most of that was in the prior year. We do see a little bit of travel, but most of that's for training related to CMFO training for our personnel. Here's a more detailed breakdown. As I said, you see $701,000 related to employment staffing agencies, and that is, again, because of the challenges we've had with recruiting. We have been required to look at contractors, especially in high needs times. ClearGov is a great software package that we've been moving to. One of the things that ClearGov gives us is an opportunity to track our web hits, as well as provide tailored both CIP as well as operating budgets online. We have links out there, and we've shared them with many members of council and their staff, and we're pretty proud of that system. The support services for Renaissance Business Center, $50,000. Contractor services, another $50,000, and then we also contract with Loomis and so forth to deal with our financial needs for cash management and moving monies between the Treasury Department and some other departments and financial institutions. The lease that I was referring to, this lease is to support our Office of Business Development Compliance, and so the $169,000, that is part of their office space, and they utilize that area over at 480 Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard. And looking at our MWBE utilization, we had a certified spend of 9%, a certified for MBE, a certified WBE spend of 12.66, totaling nearly 22%. We have total with non-certified, which we don't have a lot of, getting us closer to 24%. And we do have a fairly good mix of various parties involved in that. And that concludes the operating budget presentation.
Thank you. I've got Councilman Logan, Canali, and then Green.
Okay.
Councilman Logan.
Thank you, Chair. And this kind of stemmed from the other, in terms of practices, in terms of our policies, procedures, and practices that impact the budget. And, we've discussed that a number of times. Is there, and I'm seeing some of the same types of expenditures or increases in this budget as well, but I wanted to know, is there a review or internal audit of those that has happened in the transition. We talked about, like you said, we mentioned about the overages that have been spent. Have you all looked at, and are we making changes in how you can ask for money, or what just how you manage that? Because in several areas, again, I say, in several areas, I'm seeing that the budget is impacted by a lack of, protocols or process, procedures, policies. And it may just be that you have those in place, but the practice has been something different, and it's impacting the budget. So that's my question, number one. The second one is the 9.3 MWBE spend. Are we looking at that, of course, to increase that?
Yes, Councilwoman. I would say that in the case of providing additional practices, I did reach out to our independent auditor. Our internal audit team does not do necessarily financial audits, but our independent audit team does, and they do audit us during our financial statements during both our preparation for our annual comprehensive financial report and also through the year. So there's a fair amount of rigor around that, and we did engage with them to look at the funds, and so we have a better handle on the funds now, and they're still in the process of reviewing our funds for the various funds that we manage to make sure that there's some.
I hear what you're saying, but a lot of times those external auditors don't look at your practice. They may look at what you have, and you can always pull the audit together. But in terms of your, and it's not our oversight, your day-to-day management, but it definitely is impacting the budget. And I'm not trying to go behind and micromanage or manage you all, but I'm seeing how it's impacting our budget when you don't really have a reason for the overages, or you didn't know, or you can't explain it. Because when you follow policies and procedures, you can explain it. There's always explanation. So that I haven't heard, as in this whole presentation, that you found some ways in which you need to put some things in place so that you don't have those. I know you're going to go back and look and come back, but I do want to hear those things that are, or have to be today. And it can, I can come and meet with you over, but it seems like every presentation there is some reference to not necessarily knowing how you got there. So those, not necessarily giving me a copy of the audit or anything like that, because I've been in several audits, but I would think that an internal audit, practice of internal audit on a regular basis is important. And if you don't have those things in place, are you putting them in place? Would be important for me moving forward.
Yes, Councilwoman, we do plan to practice more fiscal prudence, especially coming out of some of the challenges that we have seen and some of the questions that have been raised by you and quite frankly, internally by us, as we look at things and kind of make discoveries as we go forward.
So as we close this process, once we get down and you've had time to look and think, and I know everything is kind of new, you were thrust into the budget season, but are those just having an open conversation, if you all could kind of share later what your findings are and how you plan on doing that, so we all can be on the same page and move forward together, us having faith and also having printed, information showing how you're going to go forward.
Yes, ma'am. So we hear you clearly, and what we'll do is we'll, no different than the status on the CIP projects and explain, we'll have, to your point, where the divisions will come and the division directors and heads will provide an overview of what they found or what circumstances exist in the plan of action that we'll move forward, and we'll share with you all as a body as well. Yes, ma'am.
I just wondered how that bidding process goes. Is it up to you or up to businesses to just watch the website to know to apply? Or are you all putting it on Facebook and advertising or however? How do people know? How do women know, minority businesses know that these opportunities are available?
Well, I'll tell you that there is a way to put our bids for procurement out on the website. There is Unfortunately, I can't say exactly what the link is for that bidding process because I've never used it. But our procurement manager, I don't think she's here right now, could speak to it more intelligently. But I will say this, it is available, and typically for much larger contracts, we do make an effort. We work jointly with the Office of OBDC to try to make sure that it's marketed effectively to
So is it
minority and
pretty much just
women.
put on the website and that's it? If you don't
Well,
see it
no,
on the
there
website.
will, and I think there's actually direct outreach for
Oh, is
some
it?
types of
Okay.
contracts. It's not all, it's kind of tailored to the type of contract.
Don't you have to be, ma'am? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, don't you have to be certified to be on the
To be
notification
considered
list?
a minority or women business
So
enterprise.
isn't,
Yes,
you know,
ma'am.
that's one thing
You have
that
to be
we can do as
certified.
council members is encourage minority businesses to become certified. And if, we might need to have Ms. Lizandri,
That's
is it
what I was
still Ms. Lizandri? No, okay, to come down and share with us, not now, or maybe after this process on how, that works, so we can give that information to minorities and women and other people in our community that should apply.
Yeah, and I think also the outreach that they do, because I know that they partner with MMBC and meaning they do community sessions and outreach. And to Councilwoman Logan's point and Councilwoman Swearingen Washington, that you just reminded me that is one of the things that was a struggle, is that we have a lot of minority contractors and women-owned contractors in the city, but getting them through the process of being certified, I remember, was a challenge. And getting them, go ahead.
And we also talked about, I did talk to her about the possibility or potential of sometimes they can partner, to get larger bids. They might not be the prime, but they can all come together and maybe get those and then kind of be mentored and eventually be able to bid on some of the larger contracts. But we have to do whatever we need to do to help build that sector of our community so that we have more businesses that are able to, because then they can hire people, at the local level and grow to be able to get the big contracts. And that's going to help the income and the tax base. The more we have a lot of entrepreneurs who can't scale up, but the more we enable them to scale up, the better we can, we'll be at our tax base and able to compete.
Yes, ma'am.
I yield back. So we might need to go on a little tour, do some in each district, a thing in each district.
Right, and
talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. I know there are opportunities. I know I've been out to speak to at least one council-based engagement that I think was well received. So we could probably talk about that some of those programs as well.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful too, because I think especially for refresher for me for sure, and then for newer members, because you get a lot of questions about why, to your point about why can't I do this, or I try to do that, and so for us to be able to get a refresher course so that we can articulate that is super helpful. Councilman, I never say it right.
Thank you, Mr.
Cut the commercial.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't write it. This is not so much for you, chief person, but maybe you could pass it down. I would like, and I don't want anybody to go back and change these fancy, glossy PowerPoint presentations, but when the other divisions that have not presented yet come to present on these vacant positions, I would like to know the length of time that they've been vacant. Not just a number, but I'd like to know the length of time that these positions have been vacant, because maybe we need to do some adjusting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Green.
Thank you, Chair. If you can go to slide 15, I just had a question about that slide, and then the next one. The city shop charges, I understood yesterday when we were talking about solid waste and the kind of charges and repairs and things. So how many cars does finance have?
Thank you for that question, Councilwoman. I kind of went fast there, but essentially we house the expenses related to the auctions. So if you looked on our miscellaneous auction line and the revenues are associated, historically we've had a very high city shop charges and city shop fuel costs. We only have one vehicle that is assigned to us that's available for our use. but those repairs and just more or less getting those
Yeah, that's a
vehicles-
nice car.
vehicles, yeah.
And shop
And
charges.
that's what we've said before. We could actually lease a nice car for that amount. But those are the expenses that are housed
Okay.
for preparation for those purposes.
I appreciate that explanation. Now, on slide 16, I'm seeing something I saw yesterday that I found concerning, which is, or the day before, employment staffing agencies to the tune of over $700,000. And that makes up over half of the professional services. And I am again confused why, when we have an HR department, everybody's having a hard time recruiting. Like, the job market is what the job market is, and it's been like that since COVID. And the things that have moved the needle on recruiting have been wages and benefits, not whether you have a staffing service sending out, requests for it. So I am confused again as to why we are an agency, a government that has a whole HR department. And I believe in their director, that we are spending, if it was, I think what I totaled up the other day was 600,000 from the other couple of divisions, and this is 700,000. So over $1 million in staffing services. I am so confused why that's how we're spending the taxpayer dollars.
Before he answers, let me clarify. So I misspoke with respect to all other agencies, but this staffing services provide contracted employment as well. With R3, there is some screening, but they have contracted employees. So you have staffed employees where we can't hire, then we actually contract out and bring on employees. And I'll let Chief Person speak for finance.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So last year, we ended up bringing in a number of very specialized people because of challenges that we had in staffing. For instance, the vast majority of our budget office, we actually obtained from Robert Half. We went out, we sought people, we had interviews. I think we successfully recruited one person independently. The others were contract employees that became contract to hire. When you do that with an agency like Robert Half, they charge you a fairly hefty expense for doing that. But we're really happy with the individuals we got. We were very fortunate. One of the downsides of that too, though, if you look at my comptroller, who I think we were actually compensating at a market wage, he was obtained through that same means, and he lasted 7 months. And so, and I'm now in a capacity where I have an interim comptroller, and we paid the fee, but we couldn't get reimbursed because they have a 3-month period of time, and it's kind of like and so when you look at those kinds of issues, and again, this was after probably 2 years, my predecessor and now me, of having that position in an interim capacity. So it gets to a larger issue, and I try not to make that big here, but you know this very well, Councilwoman. You can go across the street and make a lot more. And a lot of our specialized positions
that's my
can
question
do that.
is,
So,
wouldn't it be better, like for me, it would be better for us to pay our employees more and recruit that way than to pay a staffing company.
Yeah.
And that's the way to then keep that employee over here as across the street, wherever. I get that these may be specialized, but we are paying above what we're paying people who work next to them. If you have 2 people and one of them, you say you got one through, just regular HR, and then the rest of them you're having to use the staffing, we're paying more for that.
oh, no, I'm fully aware, Councilwoman. I guess what I'm saying is we tried the recruiting route. When I say we get to that point.
That was going to be my question, was exactly how long do you wait before you go to contract out staffing?
Pretty much as long as we possibly could. For instance, with a comptroller, I have an interim comptroller right now, and she's a great long-term team member. I don't think she has an interest in the position, but I said that to say that by charter, we're required to have a comptroller. That person has to attest every contract that's signed by the mayor. So it's not a issue of having the latitude not to have one. I have to have one. But when the last time we put it out for bid, we only had 2 applicants, and neither of them qualified. So it's mandates that to meet the job
I understand.
responsibilities.
And look, again, I do work on the other side of the street, and this is not a thing that we do. We have an HR department that works really hard at recruiting. So that's part of the reason why it's so baffling to me. And I think that it is important for us, if we're going to be spending this money, let's spend it on our employees, not on staffing agencies.
Yeah, I hear you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think the 3 divisions you really see it in though are that you're gonna see, and you'll see it in Manny's budget, but it's not necessarily across the board as much. I mean, like CDLs and things like that are troubling now, which again you see over at the county. But for us, since I've been here, it's always been the 3 highly specialized divisions: engineering, legal, and finance. Have always been the tough ones to keep up with the private sector. But I hear you. And look, in whether we do it or not, I think at the very least we can agree that an annual, just continuing, just having an annual conversation of like, is the cost benefit there? We've had to use headhunters in the private sector. No one likes to do it. Either they've got retainers or you have to pay them a portion of salary, and it's a nightmare. So I definitely get it. But look, and the other thing to Councilwoman Green's point about salaries and wages, the reality is that unless I mess this up, the majority of those 3 divisions at those levels are not represented employees, meaning they've had a 1% raise, I think, in 4 years, 5 years, while inflation's clipped in the last 24 months at like 9, 10%. So, but it's a very good point, Councilwoman. All right. Councilwoman Spring-Washington, do you have any? Yes, ma'am.
Do we need to get human resources to come? Sounds like they need to do some revamping.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. So let's do this. Let's have HR come to personnel and government affairs and give a more operational conversation with Chief Adams and Chief Pearson on a council Tuesday to talk about the policies and procedures, because I want to keep this more to finance. But I think that would be helpful to your point.
Move forward that we don't need so many hiring agencies and all of that.
Well, and at least to have Fonda and Chief Adams talk about
marketing,
which agencies are doing what work and why they're doing it. And I think that'd be beneficial.
Will do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's keep it moving. What do we have next?
Well, it's really at your pleasure. We can go through the special funds. I have a slide for that, about 6 or 7 of those that we could talk about. I think the only one that y'all probably be interested in would be the sales tax referendum fund.
Yeah,
or we can go right into debt service.
I think let's do the debt service more than special revenue funds, because the majority of those funds are enterprise, or well, they're not enterprise, but they're obligated is the nicest way, or the shortest, succinct way I can say it.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Mic check, 1, 2, 3. It was the 4th one. That one, no, that ain't it.
That's all they sent me.
That one, the 3rd one.
This one?
Yep. That's it.
Yeah, right here. Okay.
All right, let's get started.
All right.
Dr. Jeff Warren. I'm just messing with you, sir. The floor is yours.
All right.
Somebody told me your name was the bun man. It's usually when we see you.
I've been called much worse than that, so I'll take that.
They also say you knew where all the money was. Okay.
Yep. All right,
ahead.
so Andre Walker, Deputy CFO, 125 North Main Street, and I have with me, oh, you can do this.
Carol Ward, Debt Coordinator.
All right, so I'm gonna go a lot slower on this presentation than I did on the one Tuesday. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so the debt service fund. Most of the city's debt is administered within the debt service fund, excluding about $32 million in change that's been serviced out of the stormwater system fund. About $433 million in change is being administered within the sewer fund. And we got about $900,000 coming out of the general fund. There's two primary sources of revenue for the debt service fund. We get just under 85 cents of the property tax rate and 7% of the local option sales tax. Other revenues in the debt service fund include revenues that are pledged to pay special revenue debt, federal subsidy payments, and transfers from other funds. Next. All right, so there's three types of debt, broad types of debt in the debt service fund. We got general obligation debt, which is debt secured by the city's full faith and credit and taxing authority. And that includes general obligation bonds, commercial paper, the capital appreciation bonds issued for Accelerate Memphis, and a recent $6 million loan for solid waste from the Tennessee Municipal Bond Fund. Then we have appropriation obligations, which are secured by the city's payment or the city's appropriation of principal and interest payments on an annual basis. And that includes capital leases, qualifying energy conservation bonds, the bonds issued for the Electrolux project from EDGE, and also bonds issued by EDGE for Accelerate Memphis. And then finally, we have special revenue debt, which is secured by revenue and pledged to special revenue bonds. And it includes TDZ revenue, the downtown TDZ revenue bonds, the Liberty Park TDZ revenue bonds, and the sports facility revenue bonds for AutoZone Park. Next slide. All right, so general obligation debt, including the proposed 2024 A bonds, which were presented to council for your consideration Tuesday. We got about $1.7 billion in GO debt, $1.5 billion in bonds, $150 million in commercial paper, and then that TMBF loan. The debt service in FY25 on this debt is $159.5 million. Next, we have appropriation obligation debt. So we got $12.7 million in outstanding indebtedness for the Electrolux project. Debt service on it is $1.3 million. We got an $839,000 lease for solid waste. Debt service on it is $849,000. We got $832,000 in QECBs. Debt service on that is $862,000. And then we got $23.3 million in bonds outstanding for EDGE that was issued for Accelerate Memphis. Debt service on it is $1.9 million in total. We got $37.7 million in appropriation obligation debt outstanding. Total debt service in FY25, $4.8 million. All right, next slide, we got special revenue debt. So we got the downtown TDZ bonds, $92 million outstanding with the FY25 debt service of $15.6 million, $69 million in Liberty Park TDZ revenue bonds, debt service on it, $3.5 million, and we got $10.6 million in sports facility revenue bonds for AutoZone Park. Debt service on it is $2.3 million. In total, we got $171.7 million outstanding special revenue bonds. Total debt service in 25, $21.3 million. Next slide. All right, so total debt service. $114.5 million in principal payments, $71.1 million in interest payments, and $185.6 million total debt service payment. Next slide. All right, so these are the expenditures in the debt service fund. I want to highlight 2 or 3 of them. Redemption of bonds, series bonds, that's the principal payment. That's at $114.5 million we were just looking at. And then the interest, that's at $71.1 million we were looking at. At the bottom, highlighted in green, we see the $150 million. That's the $150 million proceeds from the proposed 2024 bonds, which would be used to pay off the $150 million in outstanding commercial paper. Next slide. On the revenue side, at the top, highlighted in green, we're projecting $122.6 million in property tax revenues, current tax revenues, $3.1 million in delinquent property tax revenues. Highlighted a little bit below that, you'll see a total of about $20.3 million in TDZ revenue. Majority of that is going to come from the downtown TDZ. We're projecting a surplus of about $52,000 on it. For the Liberty Park TDZ, we're projecting a shortage of about $1.8 million. But we've got a $4 million bond-funded rainy day fund, and we're going to tap into that to cure the insufficiency in revenues to cover the debt service. And then towards the bottom, highlighted in green again, you'll see proceeds from the proposed 2024 bonds, $150.8 million. Again, $150 to pay off the commercial paper and $800,000 to cover costs. Immediately below that, you'll see that $1.8 million use of that rainy day fund for the TDZ. And then below that, you'll see $6.6 million use of committed fund balance. So the debt service fund has, as of end of fiscal year 23, we had a committed fund balance of $58.8 million. We're projecting to use almost $4 million of that fund balance this year and about a little under $7 million next year. And we're also projecting to use some of that next year in 2026. However, the debt service fund balance target is only about $15 million. It represents 1/12 of the total debt service. And that concludes my presentation.
Dr. Warren, are you in the queue?
So I just want to make sure that I understand on the Liberty Park.
Yes, sir.
Okay, part of the reason that we're behind in being able to manage the debt service is we haven't done any further development there.
That is it, 100%.
Okay. All right, and the proposed development that we saw, I guess, coming from Ms. Cash about, some sort of business that's going to be games and things like that. Is that going to make up the difference of the 1.8 million, or we got to do more? It's an entertainment center or something.
Yeah. So to be honest with you, I don't know the details of everything that's being proposed, but I do know that I've seen projections where we would remain short for about another 2-3 years or so. And when we sized that rainy day fund, we anticipated that revenues would be short. And we tried to size it to an amount where we think it would cover us through FY 2026. And then in 2027, when we get to the debt cliff, we'll have sufficient funds to cover any shortages at that time.
No, Chief Adams wants to hop in.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Councilman Warren, we're planning on next council agenda providing a complete overview, and hopefully by that time we'll have draft ground leases for what's going to be developed at Liberty Park, and we'll provide that schedule as well.
Are we still trying to make that residential housing over there, or we come up with hotels or some other plan?
I like to kind of talk to you offline about that and give you, full details if you don't
Okay,
mind.
well, talk to all of my colleagues offline, but we
there
want
you
to
go.
hear, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, any other questions from this body?
Thank you,
All right,
Mr. Chair.
I'm gonna ask the budget chair to come get his seat. Thank you. I know what you're trying to do.
Big hole. We got stickers. I was hungry while I wait. Yeah, thank you. Good discussion. I was listening from the back. I'm sorry. I had to put something on my stomach that I was going to pass out. We just for note for everybody in these debt service funds, this is going to be a window for us to keep an eye on, and which is why I know they want to get their ducks in a row, because you have the Accelerate Memphis bonds that are coming, the CABs, the capital appreciation bonds is what they really are. We have the convention center debt, and we have the TDZ Fairgrounds debt, and so that is problematic. So. We got to pay our bills, and that's going to come out. We don't have the revenues to support it, so that's a problem. All right, I think that's it. I'm okay to push on through to engineering unless there's somebody, unless everybody would like to take a break. Yeah, let's just keep going. Okay, let's do it, Manny. By the way, we're going to stay on FY25, but I just looked at your appropriation statement for FY24, and it's not awesome. Look to the future for the purposes of this discussion. Yeah, let's do operating. I mean, I think, look, and I don't want to cut the conversation down, but I think we've, again, having done this a few years, the most important thing on your side is always personnel and just explaining the marketplace. I think Councilwoman Green is making interesting points, but I think you're a good person to kind of talk just a little bit about the labor market for PEs and how, you're talking about highly certified people that go through. Not only they're getting their master's in engineering, but also then seeking that PE certification, which is a whole other process of its own. That takes like what, a year, a little over a year, 4 years. Yeah, exactly. Right, like our pay is not commensurate with the marketplace. That is a problem. All right, Director Boleyn, welcome. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Manny Boleyn with the Division of Engineering. So we're here today to present the FY25 operating budget for the division. But if the council would allow me, I'd like to actually acknowledge my team members here, because I know that you've probably seen them, maybe in the elevator, what have you. But I wanted the council to see some of the members that we have in our division. So if you are within the division, please raise your hand. So these dedicated individuals are the gears that make division work. So I am very pleased and honored that these individuals is working for the divisions, and they're the one that makes things happen. So with that, we'll go ahead and move to slide 2, which shows the division's org chart. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you have the slides. Slide 3 identifies our strategic priorities. I'm just going to read a few of them. Obviously, manage installation and maintain all of our traffic calming devices within the city. We facilitate design and installation of the traffic calming devices. Those are the speed humps that are, quite popular. We administer and maintain signs and markings. We regulate all of the incoming land development projects for the city as well. In addition, we do design maintenance of all school zones and maintain those traffic control devices within the school zones. We manage majority, if not all, of the roadway, sanitation, sanitary, drainage, infrastructure within the city's rights-of-ways. We also administer and partner up with the Urban Art Commission to maintain the city's managed public art. And of course, we also collaborate quite a bit and fosters opportunities to connect with the local workforce through our STEM outreach. We'll move to slide 5. And slide 5 is our FY24 expenditure bridge to FY24 to 25 requests. So here I'd like to focus on, or I'd like to mention a couple of things. The engineering FY25 operating budget overall reflects 1% of the overall city budget. So it's 1% out of the overall city budget. Although what we're presenting today, you'll see an increase, the increase will actually be a budget neutral item. And I can explain exactly how that works. And then lastly, I would say the request for 25 in general is flat between 24 and 25. So as we go through this, if you, obviously from the description, the expenditures cover personnel, our M&S, and the first column there for the adopted budget shows that there's, we were $9.866 million roughly for FY24. In FY25, our total FY25 request is at $12,797,644. And majority of that, when I said earlier that it is a budget neutral, we are increasing our expenditures by roughly $2.6 million. However, we're also increasing our revenue by that same amount. So it is budget neutral. However, our expenditure, it does look like there's an increase, but it is budget neutral at the end of the day. That's correct. Next slide, number 6, is our program comparative spending. Again, I'm just looking at the bottom. Our total expenditure for adopted in 24 was $9.86 million. 25 request is that 12,797. That's an increase of roughly 29.7%. I did fail to mention that in slide 5, when you see under personnel services, where we had a total of roughly 1.158 or a 10% increase, slide 7 kind of breaks that down, right? So if you move to slide 7, under personnel services, our full-time salaries, there's an increase, or we're requesting on that. That's correct, yeah. So that's an anticipation promotion plan. As Chairman Carlisle indicated, we do have specialized individuals in our divisions. We have a total right now of roughly 12 professional licensed engineers. We also have about 8 engineering and training personnel, and those in engineering training would like to promote them internally. So we have to work and plan that through as we make them grow.
I'm going to hop in here on team engineering for a second, because this is something for 5 years. It's like, much like Director Zena's group is an indicator of the economic health of the local community, because they're seeing building permits and zoning cases come through. Engineering is riding shotgun right there with them. And it is almost threefold for us. One, not having people that work directly for Director Blinn is very hard to hold a third-party firm accountable, meaning even if he's got good working relationships with the individuals that are contracted over, they don't technically work for him or whoever their direct supervisor is, and it can make managing the workflow very difficult because they're under that agreement for temporary services. It also makes it difficult on the consumer basis, meaning those that are working with city engineering. At times it can, because you don't have somebody necessarily that's always consistently there, at least in the past. I'm not saying that's true now. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is that we are paying more than what we are offering. But the reality is in his division, even when we hire and promote people, what do you think we keep them for? Maybe 24 months. I mean, look, we're lucky to have a lot of wonderful people here. Everybody in this room that's willing to work out of the true public service, and I think that's an incredible thing. But ultimately, people end up in a position where they get to a point in their life and they've got to make a decision on what's in the best interest of them and their family. We lose them often, and then end up hiring them right back via the firm that they went to go work at. And his division may be the poster child for that situation. And so it really harms the city, because when those contractors are bringing in new people or we switch contractors, they don't have a familiarity. And so what happens is all of these engineering plans to get projects up and off the ground that have economic impact get slowed down, or a design for an intersection gets delayed, and it has a ripple effect on economic development for Memphis, and it's a real problem. And honestly, I fully 1,000% agree with you that it's a salaries and benefits issue. And it's just one of those things where we've never really gone to those 3 or 4. And IT actually is probably the 4th one that I left out, where they're very highly specialized. And we are just not even in the wheelhouse of competitive compensation with the private market. And we've got a comp study, which I know we've talked about. I don't know that we ever got a copy. We did get a copy of it? Okay, I'd like to get that, yeah. I think that'd just be helpful because it does give a comparison. Not helping that the county's trying to raise 6%. It's not a far walk from 125 over there to your building. But serious, in all sincerity, though, I know it sounds like I'm belaboring the point, but I cannot stress in this division the disruption it causes by not having a full complement of the people that can come in every day ready to go to work here. And it matters. I mean, you know that better than anybody.
Thanks, Chairman. Appreciate that. So continuing on, so under personnel services, we do have some lines that are being reduced. The second line there is the salaries for temporary employees. Those have been reduced. We did have some slight reduction we forecasted for our overtime. Mainly those are for our signal maintenance in the event that there's emergencies that happen. So we're forecasting a slight decrease on that. The rest are really driven by, HR, Medicare, pension, ADC, or what have you. The last item there is the proposed ISL, and this is a new complements we're requesting to be added to our division, mainly to handle the smart fiber initiative that we have taken on. Under the miscellaneous and services, or materials and supplies, that totals roughly about 1.8 million of additional claims, city shop charges, lawsuits, or what have you. And then that totals to $2.6 million is the net change. And again, 2.6 million of that net change is associated with the smart fiber. Slide 9 is the adopted revenue bridge from 24 to 25. And this is where it's reflected for that smart fiber as a revenue. As you can see under the charges of services, there's $2.6 million there. That's 100% of the change because it's a new program that we are holding on to. Yes, sir. So as part of the agreement with the BSN and deploying fiber throughout 85% of the communities here in Memphis, we have partnered with them, and that $2.6 million will actually accelerate the process within our division so that they can permit and then get that in the ground as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think we're the transfer in, right? We transferred in from the ARPA seed money.
That's correct.
Yeah. So the transfer, it's an ARPA transfer into his division. It's yeah.
In order to cover the upfront. So there's a commitment. The body, the council approved as part of the resolution late December of last year, the use of roughly $15 million in ARPA funding to help support the initiative. As well as, I believe, $7 million in Accelerate dollars, perhaps. I might step out of bounds on that.
I never asked this.
In one bucket, there was like $15 million that was dedicated out of the main bucket, but then you got additional Accelerate dollars. Yeah,
that's right. We had Accelerate, we had ARPA, and they're doing different things too. How much money did Doug pony up?
MLGNW, I can't speak to that. I can't speak to that. Sorry.
Next slide, number 10, it just illustrates the revenue for 25. That's $2.6 million. We'll move to slide 13.
Let's just rip that Band-Aid off.
Slide number 13 is the division's complement. as of for 24, we have a total of 129. We are asking for 7 additional personnel. Again, that is utilizing that $2.6 million that as a revenue to offset for that expenditure. We do have 12 current vacancies. That's roughly about 9% of the division's complement. So we are actively posting those positions, and as we discussed earlier, most of those positions are specialized positions. We try to attract them as much as we can. Unfortunately, we go through a process, and again, we work hand in hand with our HR division to post a position. We do get interest. However, what ends up happening and is as we go through that process, they're also looking for other opportunities. So we've had instances where we're trying to get them on board, and once we're ready to make the offer, only to find out that they'll decline because they got another offer somewhere else. So that is part of the challenge that we have relative to it. And then we'll move to slide 15, which is our major M&S expenditures. Our highest is the 46.9% is our miscellaneous professional services, and I can drill the next slide. We'll drill into that, and then the next highest percentage is our miscellaneous services and charges. That is majority where our the temporary speed hump program comes out of. We utilize our traffic signal procurement for equipment off of that line. So we can break down that $868,000 and provide you that as well. Keep in mind that we also have our construction inspections team. They have labs that we maintain their equipment to make sure that those are functioning properly. So all of that kind of rolls into that miscellaneous services and charges. Not to mention our typical, office-related things that we have to deal with. I do have 4 satellite offices, so it's not just City Hall. I do have 4 other satellite offices that we have to maintain. Slide 16 breaks down our professional services. And as you see there, we have 6 consultants contracted with, and they do a lot of various engineering services, studies, and designs for us, and it supplements our our operation. As Chairman Kala indicated, we are using some of our consultants to help push some of the development that come through us for reviews, and so we often consult with these consultants to do that. The last item there is our Urban Art Commission. We do partner with our Urban Art Commission, and I'd like to recognize if she's here. Yes, Executive Director Lakeisha Edwards is here as well. So if there's any questions for Urban Art Commission, she is here. Next slide, 17, is our leases. The division doesn't have any leases at this point. The next slide is 18, is the division's MWBE utilization. Certified MBE is 31.36%. We have certified WBE at 0.33, with a total of 31.69%. At the end of 23, our total spend for the division for MWBE is at 31.72%. That concludes my presentation for operating budget.
All right. We're going to ask one question to the Urban Art Commission first because of a scheduling issue.
I know that Paint Memphis has changed leadership. I just wanted to know what effect that will have with urban art.
We're about to do it right now.
Paint Memphis.
It should be.
The ones that put those. We know that Paint Memphis is the organization that put all those monsters.
If you will name and title for the record, please.
Lakeisha Edwards, Executive Director, Urban Art Commission.
We know the Paint Memphis has changed leadership. We just wanted to know how that would affect the urban art.
Considering the fact that it's two separate entities and we actually do not have a true partnership, it doesn't affect us. However, it does affect what can happen with other projects that may have been engaged by that organization previously.
So can some of those projects go to urban art to make sure that they are of a high caliber?
No. So any projects that Paint Memphis had, they did not do the art for hire. So they basically had volunteers coming in from all over the country to participate in those events. When we have a call for artists, of course, it goes through the community, through our selection process, and we have a more detailed process for our projects, and our projects are already approved by our PAOC as well as the council.
So they're two separate entities. There's no way to merge the two or to transfer?
I don't think so.
Okay, so we just kind of stuck. Trying to see how that we can bridge the gap and partner with an organization that will be more.
So we do have opportunities to create a solution for the particular project that you're speaking of on Chelsea. However, what I need right now is proof that that is a permission wall and that there are no barriers of us receiving any additional assistance to make it a community project going forward.
Okay.
But if they have any other projects that are on the table, I don't have any knowledge of them or access.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, ma'am. All right, let's wrap on up with CIP, and then we're going to go immediately to Councilwoman Logan.
Thank you, Chairman. So we'll move into the Division Engineering's FY25 proposed CIP. I guess we can just jump directly to slide 6.
Let's talk traffic calming, traffic signals, speed humps.
Sure. So we'll start with slide 6. This is basically a summary of the division's request for CIP dollars. The total summary is roughly $3.575 million, and this overall reflects roughly 1.6% of the overall GEO bond for capital expenditures this. I'm sorry, that's overall funding budget is 1.6. However, just for GEO bond, our request is roughly 3.8% of the GEO bond total for CIP. So again, I just want to repeat that. It's 1.6% of the total funding, but it's roughly 3.8% just for GEO bond. So the first project we have is our HSIP cover line. The request there is $150,000. This project will provide matching funds for the Highway Safety Improvement Program directed by the state, and the Federal Highway Administration defines SHIP as a program to achieve a reduction in traffic fatalities and serious injuries on all public roads. So that supports that effort. And the ask again is $150,000. The next project is our traffic calming device cover line. The ask there is $1.25 million. Again, this is for various traffic installation of traffic calming devices, speed humps, traffic circles, rumble strips along local neighborhood streets, as requested mainly from citizens. The next project after that is our traffic safety development cover line. The ask there is $500,000. This cover line was actually initiated, I believe, in FY22, driven by a council member. And so this project funds specific traffic safety development initiative by districts as specified and mandated by members of city council. So we provide a list of potential, oftentimes the improvements here are along schools, and we'll provide council a list of schools within their council districts, and we solicit from y'all what improvements you want in which schools, and then we carry that forward. So that the ask there is 500,000. The next project after that is our traffic signal cover line. This is used for various things. One, mainly for modernization of our traffic signals throughout the city. Potentially, yes, sir. Yeah, so to fully
Director
modernize
Blinn,
it.
how much does a fully modernized intersection cost in 2024 dollars?
It between $600,000 to $700,000 per intersection is what we're. So the ask there is $1.275 million. And then the last is our urban art installation cover line. This is $400,000, and it's been consistent at $400,000 for the last several fiscal years. So with that, I open it up to council questions.
Councilwoman Logan.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question about the signs, hold on. Signs and signals, signs and markings complement, page 13. So the signs and markings is a separate department or separate group of people from the signal maintenance?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you for that. So the signs and markings, are they the ones that go out and put up the stop signs and any other signs? And there are 28 people on that crew?
Yes, so that service centers handles 100,000 signs that we have to maintain throughout the city. They also are responsible for the striping along paved roads, so we actively do that.
And the honorary signs?
We do the honorary signs as well, that's correct.
And it's 28 people for the whole area?
That is correct, yes, ma'am.
So is this the right number of people? Is this the 28 people, is that sufficient for all of that? I'm just asking because stop signs are very, very important. And I've seen them several times in different places doing the striping, doing the signs and all of that. And I know from working in the community for a long time, the signs on 311, replacement of signs, and then these people knocking down street signs. If you have an ambulance and they can't find the street sign because it's been knocked down, those things are critical. And so for them to have to do the striping, the honorary signs, the street signs, the no parking signs, the speed limit signs, I'm not questioning, I'm just asking because I've had these problems in my district the whole time I've been in office, and I know they have a lot to do. So I was wondering, is this an accurate complement for post-COVID? And is that related to the overtime? It's just on page 7. Yeah, I saw it says reduce that signal maintenance. What does that mean?
So I guess I'll take the first question.
I'm sorry, it's loaded, but
yeah. So signs and markings.
Unpack.
So I would say, as I mentioned, we have over 100,000 different types of signs within the city. We do have a goal of replacing and repairing signs of roughly 15,000 annually. That's our target. That's our goal.
70,000 annually?
15,000 annually.
15?
15,000. We have over 100,000 throughout the city. So roughly about 10% is what our goal is on an annual basis. The complement that you're seeing there, 28, handles not only the signs, but also the striping as well. But the striping, obviously, we don't do that during the wintertime because it doesn't stick on the pavement. So there is some fluctuations there, but signs is a year-round thing. So we do that on a yearly basis. It is a regulatory item. And so when we get notification of a sign or a stop sign being down, it is incumbent upon us from a liability perspective to put that in place as quickly as we can. So we have a goal of getting that out in within 24 hours. So we'll get the complaint, and we have to make sure that we address that immediately. So
Do they have to work overnight ever, or into the night, or 10 o'clock at night? Or if they get a call and they have to go to it at 11 o'clock at night?
yes, so that's part of some of the overtime potentially is on that, is when we get a call or after hours, and we have to make sure that we bring the team in to be able to do that.
Okay, so have you all looked at, or can you look at or bring back whether you need some more people, or whether you need them to be doing overnight, and, you know, is that gonna burn them out and they quit, or that kind of thing? Because the stop signs and those street signs are extremely important in our community. So that's, I yield back. I'm not trying to tell you how to, I just want to know what you're gonna do about it. You know, how we're gonna resolve that part so we can keep everybody safe.
Yes, ma'am. So it is, I would answer that question by saying that in the past, the division at one time or another had almost 200 compliments. Okay. Over time, there's been reduction in forces.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So in order for us to maintain the required response time, we have to be able to supplement some of that. So that may take some overtime to do that. It may take some additional resources to be able to maintain that level, knowing that our complement has been reduced over time. So it's a balance.
Yeah, and I do understand what you're saying. I understand maybe how you got there, but I'm glad you mentioned it, because I knew you had a lot more people before and you just dwindled down. But right now we have a different climate in our community, that there's a lot of drag racing, there's a lot of reckless driving. They running into these signs and knocking them over. I'm not going to belabor the issue, but I still say those signs that have the street, there needs to be some, you probably got priorities, but if you don't have enough people to do it, the priority doesn't matter, because you ain't going to be able to get to it. So if you could just kind of circle back later and kind of y'all think about it, talk about it, and let me know what we're going to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, you had one more in there, though. Did you take both questions?
I did. I kind of alluded. She had a question about the overtime for signal.
Got
And
it.
similarly, we have to be able to address our.
I can clarify if I need to. What I stated was, I would like for you to come back and let me know after you all have time to deliberate whether or not the complement is the right size. Do we need to add more? Because, or are you is the overtime okay? But the stop signs and the street signs are a priority, and they're not getting, we want to make sure they continue to get up faster than they are. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll discuss internally. We'll come back and provide one current capability, and then of course our partners that help us and augment some of the staff. Okay, and then what you'll do is you'll see a plan of action.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Green.
Thank you. I was noticing on your NWBE spend, I find it particularly disappointing. Your WBE spend is just $11,000, which is 0.33%. And I know that we can't get contracts with what's not out there. And so it's just my challenge, truly more to the council and to the administration in general, that when we find ways and places and nonprofit grants that we can give that encourage girls to go into STEM, that we do that, because we have to create a pipeline for you to be able to actually have these contracts go to women in engineering. And so I understand the market, especially in Memphis, what it is right now. I'm just encouraging us as a body and as an administration to work together to increase the number of girls and women that go into these fields, so that someday we'll maybe get to 1% of spend, but hopefully much more than that. That's all.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I think it's a great point. Members that are in the back, if you're listening and up here, now is a good time, not right this minute, but between now and the end of wrap up, I highly encourage you to go and meet with Director Boleyn and Chief Engineer, Chief Traffic Engineer Randall Tatum, and talk about what priorities of traffic calming. And I learned something from Michael. One's traffic calming and one is speed bumps, are different names, but But the traffic calming program and basically the speed hump program, and so that you are aware and you are communicating to them in your districts where you would like those things to go so that they can put a plan together and then, the council can kind of go over it but they've been good partners in the last few years with us about trying to meet those needs because there are members that will hear things for a specific school or a specific intersection and Director Blynn's team has been very good about trying to be responsive to those requests. Manny, did you have a follow-up? I thought, yeah.
There's two different things. So the traffic calming devices is for the speed humps. We do have a list of the construction ready list, and we can certainly provide that list to the council members. But we also do have a list for the traffic safety development, and we can distribute that to the council members as well. And you can select like which ones you want to hit.
Yeah, thank you. That much better. All right. Colleagues, anything else for the engineering division? Thank you, team. We are going to get out of here. We are back Monday at 3 o'clock. We're not doing that today. We are coming back Monday at 3 o'clock to hear police and fire, so get a really good night's sleep Sunday.
You're a good man. You've been asleep today.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Councilwoman Walker. If I don't see you or we don't see each other, to all the mothers in the room, we wish you an absolutely wonderful Mother's Day. We know every day is Mother's Day. Every day is Mother's Day. So we hope you have all have a wonderful weekend.